When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does online business better than Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/income.
Stop. 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 Had enough? Kick out mucus and quiet the cough with Mucinex 12-Hour DM for long-lasting cough and chest congestion relief. Buy Mucinex 12-Hour DM at your local retailer. Use as directed.
Slow Burn Media, Evergreen Podcasts, and Killer Podcast presents Who Killed, a podcast that provides a voice for the voiceless.
With Margaret leaving and her passing, then I'm the only one left.
Well, I know that Margaret, they left her room the way it was. They had purchased Christmas presents for her. They left them wrapped. How long that went on, I don't know. But that first year, they certainly did that. That's tough to hear. It's tough to even think about. How do you process that? I can't imagine. And it goes to us trying to make sure that we provide, Margaret's passed on, but Mark and the rest of the family are still there, and we want to make sure we provide that closure. It's important.
Yeah, there's something, back then at that time, I think there was a handful of dangerous creeps. But then the question becomes is, did they know each other?
I would love to sit down with this person and talk with them. Find out what was your motivation, what were you thinking, how did this happen? Tell me the story. People want to know. It's about time to unburden yourself and let everybody know what happened.
This has been going on for 29 years almost, and it just didn't end the day that it's been going on for 29 years, and I've been a part of this. In the beginning, behind the scenes, a little bit more in front of the scenes right now.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Who Killed. I am your host, Bill Huffman, and this is a Slow Burn Media, Evergreen Podcasts, and Killer Podcast production. I talked last week about the Amy Mihaljevic update, and I had mentioned that I might have a special guest on this week to discuss the case, and guess what? I do. And shocker, it is Nick from the True Crime Garage podcast. Welcome back to the show, Nick. It's actually the only second time this year.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I've really been absent from Who Killed lately, but it's always fun to join you. And this is some good news, right? Oftentimes we're discussing nothing but doom and gloom, and of course,
or debunking.
Yes, and we wish that there did not need to be any good news. In reality, the truth of the matter is you and I became friends through this case, as odd as that may sound. And in reality, we may have never met had this case never happened. And really, that's what you want at the end of the day. This thing never should have happened to begin with, but now it has. And here we are talking to one another once again. And we are on the eve of the 35th sad anniversary that's coming up of the day that Amy Mihaljevic was abducted. And
yeah, to think, yeah.
Can you believe it's been 35 years?
No. And I can't believe it's been 7 years really since I started the project of, diving into this case. It's crazy how time goes, especially in a case where we all want to see answers. I mean, again, like you mentioned, we became friends through this case, and it's also how I became friends with James Renner, the author, and
Me as well.
So it's an odd thing. But like you said, it's rare that we actually get to talk about some positive things, because I believe the last time that we actually discussed this case was when there was some dubious report from a certain local station in Cleveland that stated that there was a new, I don't know, bit of evidence that they had uncovered in the police files, but yet that story was released during sweeps and it turned out to be a nothing burger. But this one is a little bit different. And we actually have some DNA, and we actually have the police talking about how encouraging this lead actually is.
Yes. And so from my understanding, they have a stain that they know to contain or believe to contain suspect DNA. And
Correct.
now we're going to use this to find our man after all of these years. And that in itself can be a long process. And also, let's keep in mind, there's no guarantees with these things. And so I would say it's probably not at the level of a shot in the dark, but it's probably closer to 50-50. Should they be able to get something? And you stop me at any time if I'm wrong here, because other than a couple of very short articles on the matter, that's as much as I've been able to comb through it this time.
Yeah, I've reached out to some sources, and I'm waiting to hear back from a few of them on what this all means. But I did correspond with Renner, and we both agreed that this definitely seems like a step in the right direction, at least a big step in the right direction. Whereas back in 2018, when I first sat down with Torsney and Spetzel, they basically said a lot of the same quotes that you kind of read in those short articles about, we're 6 months to a year away from the technology, and it's you don't want to poo-poo the new evidence, because it is more significant than what we have talked about in the past. It's the most significant update since the curtain and the blanket. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
The remind me to circle back to the curtain and blanket here in a little bit, but
You bet.
you know me. One thing that I'm always looking at is police, investigators, FBI, especially when they're able to do this well in advance, they are policing their words. Their words that they choose to use and choose not to use can provide us a little bit of insight into what it is that they're working with in the stages of their investigation. So I'm always trying to key in on what words are they using, what words are they leaving out, and is that purposefully done? And so in this case, my quick question to you is, and I don't expect you to have the answer 100% here, but going off of memory, Bill, what are they saying about this stain? Are they saying this is a newly found stain after poring over the physical evidence, or this is something that we've been aware of and we've been sitting on?
I think this is from what I can interpret through reading between the lines, like you said, is that this is a newer, like they discovered it through, they're considering it nuclear DNA. So I'm guessing that they may have seen the spot or known of the spot, but the technology just wasn't there. Again, when I was interviewing them, they were very confident that the technology would be right around the corner. And that was 6 years ago. So it's one of those things, like you said, it's not going to happen overnight, and it's not just a shot in the dark. It is definitely more of something than nothing. And as far as what they're going to do with it, I mean, I read that the Bay Village Police Department and FBI have spent over $100,000 on DNA testing. So it makes you
I read
wonder
the
what.
same thing.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, like, when they say, I think Elish said it's 6 months to a year. They're just speculating, obviously, and of course we all want to see this case solved, but with this new DNA, the biggest thing about it, opposed to what they had before, which was just a couple of hairs, and I could always use like the toothpick, example of, you have 5 and it's going to take 5 to get a test result. Well, you don't want to do that because then all 5 are gone and you don't have anything else to use. So I think the same thing goes here, where it's not that we can't. It's not that we want to ruin all the DNA. I mean, he does mention that it's a small amount, but it's this DNA that can actually lead to it's male DNA, and it apparently can lead to a perpetrator, whereas the other hairs, that technology is, I guess, way further off as far as identifying, because they could, I guess, identify a certain ethnicity and there were certain things they could deem from the hairs that they had, but it wasn't going to ever be like the smoking gun. Well, what I mean?
That's a shame, because if that is in fact the truth. So here's all right. Let's just kind of push everything aside here and full reveal to all the listeners out there. Okay. Because for what you're getting, listeners, and you would get this on my show, True Crime Garage, as well. You would get it on damn near any podcast out there. There are a handful that may have scientists and people that work with DNA on those shows. I've listened to some. Most of the time they're a guest rather than a host. But what you're getting here today, what you would be getting on other shows as well, is you are getting information from 2 guys that are clearly not scientists, who then are relaying information that has been given to them from detectives who are also not scientists. So what you're getting is this game of telephone. And in fact, I was on the phone at length earlier this week and late last week with a detective from a jurisdiction here in the state of Ohio. And I'm very happy to announce, I can't say what case it is or what jurisdiction it is, but the Porchlight Project, which I work with, is a non-profit organization here in the state of Ohio working to help solve some cold cases and identify unidentified remains of victims. And so we've been in talks. I've been in talks with getting a case from a certain jurisdiction here in Ohio, and that case goes back a couple decades. So the detective and I are having these lengthy conversations about DNA, and he's giving me numbers. I'm reciting things back to him. And then he says, what is that? Those letters that you rattled off, what do those mean? And I go, they mean, and we have long conversations about truly at the end of the day, something that neither of us know 100% about, but we've been in rooms with individuals that do know these things. So maybe we know more than your average bear. But some of this is hearing this from the detectives who are working with the labs. And so a lot of this is, and it's also breaking technology. Filtered. Well, and you heard what Bill said earlier. It's they're being told by the experts in some cases, not just Amy's, but in other cases, we're waiting on this technology, or that technology is around the corner. It's a year away, maybe 5 years away. So in some regard, the scientists don't fully know. The people working in the tech don't always fully know exactly the all of the terminology and everything in these conversations. But what we're being told here is that so I said that's disappointing earlier when you were talking about the hairs in the DNA, because what you were describing is what they call phenotyping, where the DNA will not lead you. You can't use it for genealogy to lead you to a family tree and then through that family tree find the suspect. what it can do is present you with a makeup of the individual, where you're going to get their a general ethnicity background for them, likely eye color, likely hair color, and things of that nature. Of course, it's not going to tell you the age of the offender, but it can tell you a lot about. And one organization in particular that did a good amount of work, and I think they were the ones to first have done phenotyping, and then they took it a step forward and did snapshot DNA, was Parabon Nanolabs. And they did that with the several cases throughout the years. And so any of you true crime buffs out there, if any case that you've reviewed where you're seeing a computer generated image of the likely offender, that's where that comes from. That's not typically that's not an eyewitness. The eyewitness, you're going to get a composite sketch. And so if you're seeing a computer generated image, you're seeing this phenotyping doing its work. And I would have loved to have seen phenotyping on this Amy case. Maybe the problem with that is that it's going to look like 40% of the males in Bay Village.
Yeah. So that's exactly.
And that was kind of the problem with at least one of the composite sketches in her case, was that it looked like 30% of the males in the state of Ohio.
No, it looked like 30% of the country. I mean, if you opened up the joke was, with Spetzel, it was like, it looks like any guy that you see it anywhere. He was the most generic composite sketch ever. And, Mr. Mihaljevic, Mark, he was like, it looks like John Denver. Like, and it does look like John Denver. It's like,
it does.
It's like, I wonder what John Denver was up to in 1989. But anyway, yeah, you're right. So the DNA that they had before, they were always kind of squirrely about what it all really was. And they wouldn't exactly, I think Renner somehow got a hold of some profile or something along those lines. But at the end of the day, what I think is going to be interesting is if they do, and like if Renner and I, like we said, think this is going to be eventually solved in the next 6 months or a year, and we're hoping at least, it'll be interesting to see what happens and who this person is, considering when you mentioned reading between the lines of what the police say and what the media says and what the investigators and her dad told me. What I was always led to believe, and I've got quotes of it, I've got them on audio saying it, is that anybody that's been in the media is not the suspect. So they had to have some sort of idea of who they were looking for, because we know the names that have been in the news: Harold Bound, Dean Runkle. These are the popular names. What was the guy out of Fairview? I'm having a brain moment. Billy Strunak. And, those guys are all individuals that would be interesting if it was like, if I wasn't told that. Now, should I believe everything that I'm told? No, but I was told by pretty credible people.
Yeah. And I mean, you were in those meetings and I weren't, so I was not. And so I wonder what they mean by that statement. Anybody in the media is not a suspect. Does that mean you've cleared this individual? And if you did, why? What's the basis on clearing them? Because moving off of a suspect or person of interest is much different than clearing them.
Sure.
And oftentimes you'll hear investigators say, well, nobody's cleared until we find the guilty
That's a
party.
Classic. Yeah.
So you have to wonder what that means. And then also that blanketed statement of anyone in the media. Well, who does that include and who does that not include?
Exactly.
And so
it's a vague statement. So it kind of leaves them, I guess, an out. If it turns out to be somebody that has been, named before, but, I don't know. I mean,
and right. And what are they basing that off of? Is it right? Because I do know let's go back to DNA for a second, because I don't think that they're giving that statement in regard to DNA evidence, but if it were with DNA evidence, I know in some cases, they have enough suspect DNA to exclude somebody.
That's what I
But
would conclude by that. Yeah.
okay, so that's your takeaway from that statement.
That's my takeaway from it. I mean, when Spetzel looked at me and said, I've been to Key West, that kind of, to me, that was double speak for, I've spoken to Runkle.
Yeah, because I don't know what other suspect or person.
Key
We
West.
should say person of interest, because suspect is a very different
Oh,
term.
definitely not Yeah, definitely not suspects, because I even, when I asked, I said, listen, we all have seen the movies. We've all watched these TV shows, and it's like you have the hard-nosed detective that's got a short list, or a guy that I know it's that guy. And I remember posing that question to Spetzel and him being like, no short list, man. No short list. And I was like, so like no top 5, no top 10? He's like, honestly, no. So
because of going back to that other statement of they had a short list, it sounds like at one time, and they've worked to move people off of that short list.
That's a very good interpretation of what that was probably implying. Very, it's astute. Keep
in mind, the Hollywood Hills guy was really the Hollywood Hills. That's not what I meant to say. Now I'm blanking on the horse stable.
Oh, the Holly Hill Farm.
Holly Hill Farm. Thank you. Harold Bound. He was the one that they were circling like vultures above for the early stages of the investigation. And
yeah,
I'm guessing that they moved off of him. If there were somebody they could move off of, he was one that they seemed to have spent the most time on.
And Strunak. I mean,
yeah.
It was Strunak was at least enough in the at least enough of a suspect or a person of interest for Ressler to write about it. I mean, how would his name come up to Ressler when he was in town, for the 2 days that he was, giving his hand to help with the case, which again, was it helpful that he put in his book that he thought it was Billy Strunak? No, it was not helpful. Not at all. So,
but
don't do that.
That was FBI agent Dick Wren's person of interest for a while as well. And then, as we know, Strunak passes away before, as Ressler puts it, that he, along with Wren and other FBI agents, could have grilled him on the case.
And then, like I said, it will be very interesting to see what it is at the end of the day, who this person is. I hope to live long enough to see it. And I hope Mark is around and all that stuff, because, he deserves answers. And that leads me to the question that I asked Mark about the case. And that was, do you think you're going to know the suspect? And he said, yes. So
really,
yeah, that's that was a kind of an eye opener for me. And that's why I've always focused on, or always believed that it had something to do with Mark's background, not necessarily Mark himself or at all. Cause I don't get that vibe, but I'm not an investigator, so I can't say anything,
but Mark worked in a large company.
He worked in a very large company, worked for Buick, and he was a sales rep. And again, he was traveling to all these different dealerships. He was friends with a former neighbor of mine who's friends with a notorious or infamous, or whatever you want to call it, individual that has been connected to some weird stuff that, I'm not going to name. But it is certainly possible that and I've said that throughout my show and throughout my series on Who Killed Amy Mihaljevic, that I believed it was probably somebody within that background of Mark's, from the auto industry, because you employ everybody from people that wash the car to the bank president. And the most likely person to not the bank president, I meant the car dealership president, but you know what I mean? Like, it's not usually the low man on the totem pole. It's usually something shady going on up top. And again, all our minds can run. And I think we've all done that with this case. I mean, I wrote a freaking fictional screenplay about this case, and it was a whole big conspiracy at the end. But we know, you and I know, that those things don't really exist other than in the movies. So this person is probably somebody they know.
I've always thought that your theory, your thought on that is rather intriguing. I've always found Renner's theory and thought rather intriguing as well. I mean, he had a lot of different persons of interest in his book before he came to this Dean Runkle idea of the teacher that worked at the nature center, and then
he wasn't even in the book.
Right, correct. And well, because he was unknown to Renner at the time of writing the book. And in fact, it was the book that led to interest from persons in the area to contact Renner and say, hey, you might want to take a look at this guy. Here's something going on here. And then, my theory is that it was potentially somebody that was involved in this taking of the school pictures, or that worked for the company in the development or delivery or the billing process of those school pictures. So
I think that's a great theory too. And I've always thought that is very intriguing. I mean, I think if anybody's seen Red Dragon or Mindhunter, knows that's not Mindhunter, Manhunter. God, I'm screwing things up. The original Hannibal Lecter film, and that individual he worked in a film processing facility, and that's how he would get his victims. And yeah, I would imagine that would be a prime position for somebody who was into that kind of scene, as far as younger girls and wanting to put themselves around it. I mean, we know that Renner's got a book coming out about the Boy Scouts, and we both know a lot about the shadiness that happened in the Boy Scouts and their P file, and their, there was a lot of stuff that was just shady. And there's some, I don't know. You never know until you know, I hate to say that, but like, I just spoke with Sarah Ferris, from Conning the Con, and she's over in the UK, and we were talking about Jimmy Savile or Seville, and he was the host of Top of the Pops, and that's a huge British show. And he just so happened to be this huge philanthropist, and he loved to donate money to children's hospitals. And then it turns out when he died that he was perhaps the most, if in the top 10 worst pedophiles in history. And again, you never know until you know. Like Renner's connection to the Lake Erie Science Center. Renner connected Runkle to that, but there's also other individuals at that science center that have.
Oh yeah, and there's other
my interest.
So for those that are tuning in and hearing me on your show for the first time, as you pointed out, this is only my second time this year, but to go way back when we first recorded together, probably within the first two sessions or occasions that we recorded together, I had kind of laid out my theory of, I have always been under the belief that the key to finding Amy's killer, now DNA aside, right, physical evidence and science aside, that the way to find her killer was identify how the killer knows Amy, the victim, but but the victim, Amy, doesn't know the perpetrator. And if you can figure out that connection, then you may be able to find the killer through that connection. That connection could lead you to that man, should lead you to that man. It might lead you to a pool of people, and you have to find and pull from there the correct one. But I had always thought, going back to my own childhood, and what's interesting about this case compared to other cases is the three people, you, me, Renner, we all grew up in Ohio. We're all within what, a year and a half calendar age of one another.
Oh yeah.
And you can put Amy into that year and a half as well. So
for sure.
We all grew up with very similar experiences. And when I look back on my childhood, the quickest way for somebody to know a lot about me would have been through the purchase of school pictures or sports team pictures growing up, because we all, the envelopes, you would fill out the envelope and everybody could see the information on the envelope because usually it was on the outside of the envelope.
That's right.
Kid's name, mom and dad's name, the check's enclosed inside. That's the only thing that you can't see, is the check that was put inside. And it's what team are they on, or what school are they in, what grade, how old are they? And then you would have the image of the kid on the pictures that were then you hand this envelope in with a check inside of it. You get the envelope back with no check, but now it's been replaced with the pictures that you purchased. So if you wanted to, you could learn damn near everything you wanted to know about, at least driver's license type information about your potential victim, the boy or girl that is on the pictures inside. And we know that the killer called her house. We know the abductor called her house and had a phone call, conversations with Amy. So we know that somehow this perpetrator knew her phone number. Now, did they know that it was Amy's phone number? We won't know until there's an arrest, until they're able to dig through everything once they find the guy. But I think there stands a chance that that is true. And the thing is, Amy was smart. She didn't identify the person's name when she spoke with him on the phone. And it doesn't seem like at first glance that all we have to go off of is the eyewitness statements who were about her same age, that saw a man walk up to her, put his hand on her shoulder, say, Amy. She turns around, looks at him, and then the two walk off. And she's old enough, she's smart enough, that I've always believed this. She's old enough and smart enough at that age that had she recognized the dude, because she's very likely being told on the phone, you don't know me, I work with your mother. And we know that based off of what she tells her friends. Some of that we can surmise from what she has told her friend. Well, had he shown up and she recognizes him, she's probably going to go, wait a second, something's fishy here. I don't know if I'm going to go with this guy. Or if somebody's calling you on the phone, Bill, and says, you don't know who I am, but you clearly recognize their voice, you're not going to fall for that shtick. No. And so what's interesting to me is, I'm not saying my theory is any better than anyone else's. I don't know that your theory or Renner's theory is any better than anyone else's. But what I find interesting is that collectively, when you compare our three theories together, the one element that they all share is somehow this guy knew her, but she didn't know him. And that can be true if this guy worked in some capacity at Buick. This is very true if the guy worked at some capacity at the Lake Erie Science Center. And this is true if it was some guy that worked in capacity with the company that was taking the school photos, or and to take the school photo one a little bit further. And this also plays into your theory, plays into Renner's theory as well. But with the school photo one, they didn't just take Bay Village's school pictures. This company drove around more to the region and took pictures for not only schools, I'm guessing probably also sports on some occasions, youth sports. But
oh yeah, definitely they took my picture for sure.
Yeah,
I guarantee you, it's the same company that took the pictures at Rocky River that took the pictures at Bay Village. I mean, we're neighboring cities. It's only common sense.
And the other thing too that I want to point out as well is that what's the chances of this guy still being alive? Well, I guess that could be good and bad, because if he's of the type that's going to reoffend, it would be better if this guy wasn't alive and hurting other people. Even if it's not at a level of murder, but he certainly was attracted to a girl of Amy's age, at least on this occasion. So I don't think it was the first time he was, and I wouldn't guess it would be the last either. And he acted on it too, which separates him from other pedophiles, other types of pedophiles. Now, if he were to still be alive, the silver lining there is that that we might be able to bring this guy to justice and throw his ass behind bars for the remainder of his life.
Right.
And
that would be ideal.
I put it at about a 50-50 shot, because we know Mark Mihaljevic is still alive. And why am I saying that? Because again, I go back to the eyewitnesses that they said, well, we just assumed that was Amy's dad. I think at least one of the witnesses said something to that effect. And
yeah,
so
Renner reported that, I believe.
What I believe, my takeaway from that is that these kids looked at this man, and the appearance of him is that of an age of a person that would be about the same age as Amy's father. And so that gives us a little bit of a glimpse into his possible age. At least I would say it gives us a window, right? 5 to 7 years, let's say. But he's not. And why do I think that's important? So Mark Mihaljevic would have been what? Probably mid 30s, early.
That's what I would.
We checked this one time.
Yeah.
We checked this one time, and I want to say he was 33 to 35, going off of memory, somewhere in that range.
So was a little older than that, but yeah, I mean, again, 30 to 40 for a 10-year-old. What's the difference? They both look old to them.
Well, I'll tell you, my father was 35 when I was 10.
Did he have a mustache? Because he was a detective.
He did.
That's the reason why I ask.
You son of a gun. How did you know? You're a detective yourself, aren't you, Bill?
Well, it's just one of those.
You better work on that mustache, sir.
When you're an 80s cop, man, I mean, it's just part of that just is part of your wardrobe.
Well, and where I grew up, you don't get the job unless you show up to the interview with a mustache.
But a big old stash.
Yeah. So anyway, but again, if Mark is the same age as my father when I was at 10, let's pretend for a moment, mid 30s, right? 35.
Right.
So,
yeah.
But what that tells me is the dude that came up to her was not 19, is what it tells me. And he wasn't 65, because children and anyone with eyeballs can tell the difference usually between 19 and 35 and 35 and 65. So he wasn't a teenager looking type. He wasn't a very young man looking type. And he also wasn't elderly or up there in years. He was of the age that having never seen Amy's father before, at least one person got that impression based off of the age that this guy appeared to be. Now, I say all that because Mark's still alive. That means if this suspect's about the same age, this guy could very well still be alive, and we might see him in handcuffs one day. We might see him at trial one day.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, too, we have to look at the fact that there's still the connection between Ashland and Bay Village that we haven't established. Once that person is figured out, I mean, then we'll be able to go, oh, well, duh, that's why he took her to Ashland. Because, again, I've been there. It's not, you don't just drive randomly and end up there. You don't. It's impossible. Most people who have got a body that they want to discard and try to hide or whatever are pretty much going to go to the closest spot that they can. This is, again, 53 miles from where she was abducted, and in the middle of the field, but not really in the middle of the field, because it was basically he carried her body over one of those natural water wells,
culvert or
culvert,
ditch.
yeah, whatever, ditch, and placed her up in the cornfield or wheat field that it was in. And there's no way that you would have just randomly come across this spot. So again, like Renner's always said it, and I have to agree with it 100%, that this person knew that area as well as the Bay Village area, because we know that the phone call was not made long distance. And because, again, that's what the only calls that they recorded back then. And
Yeah.
that this one call that supposedly came to Amy, they had no record of. So we know he didn't call her from a different area code. Now,
And
granted,
again, at least one call to another person at one point in
another
a different
attempt,
area
yeah.
as well. Yeah. So
Yeah, I
so
think there's
that's
testing
what's
the
weird
waters.
about this guy. Yeah, that's what's weird about this guy. He's local enough that he's making a local call to Amy, but he's also not local enough that he's placing her body elsewhere in a spot that is probably likely to be somewhat familiar to him, that he's got some level of comfortability with. But there's also at least one or two other phone calls that are outside of Bay Village area as well. So it's like he's local enough, but he's also not local enough.
Now, the one thing I can say about that is that the area codes in 1989 stretched a lot further than they did.
They did.
And they do
Less
now.
people,
I mean, the
but-
population was, the less population. I mean, I went from a 216, which is what we were when Amy was abducted, to 440 later on. And I don't know if you guys had the same thing. I mean, I think you've always been 614, but you might have, they might have split up Franklin County into different area codes, because I know they did it in Cuyahoga County. So
they introduced the 740 at some point, but
right.
I think
that's what it was. Yeah.
I think that might have been in my early 20s. So it was a ways, it was a ways after.
So how much did 614 cover?
Well, when I was a boy, let's go back to 1989 when this all started.
Right.
In 1989, I would wager Franklin, I love to say that, I'd wager Franklin that 614 covered every bit of Franklin County, which I don't quote me on this. I believe at one time it was the most populous county in Ohio.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
Cleveland's been shedding population forever, and Columbus has just been growing. So that doesn't surprise me. And yeah, so basically the same thing goes for the Cleveland area. So that 216 number, that went all the way across to the east side. I mean, so if you've ever been to Cleveland, Cleveland's divided up by east side and west side, and it's the Cuyahoga that cuts it off. And we're talking about a pretty significant stretch of population back in 1989 that could have made this call without being caught via long distance phone call. So I think we always got to remember that. It's like, I want to say it's like, oh, it's got to be somebody that's like super close to Bay Village, but it could have been, that one worker that was killed by his buddy that said, he was going around saying that he killed Amy Mihaljevic. And, they've supposedly, he had worked at Amy's house. And again, he was all the way on the east side. If it was him, that number would not have come up. So I'll be interested to see where this leads. And I know that we're still kind of we're just they even say it in the article, it's quoted from the police, we're kind of in a holding pattern, and we were in a holding pattern in 2018, but I feel a lot better about this holding pattern than I did back then.
Well, and here's the thing too. This is a couple months back, and I've referenced this before on True Crime Garage a few times. So this is very strange, Bill, and I'm a very strange guy. So this
totally.
fits. This fits right.
Weirdest guy I've ever met in my life. Yeah.
There we go. But I am a regular reader of a magazine called Texas Monthly, which seems strange.
Great. No, it's a great magazine.
So you're familiar.
I am very familiar. Anybody in true crime doesn't know Texas Monthly is. They don't know what they're doing.
But I think a lot of people don't know Texas Monthly. So,
well, then what do you think that I just implied?
There you go. So it's very strange. I'm, you're an Ohio boy. I'm an Ohio boy, but I'm a regular reader and still a subscriber to Texas Monthly magazine. And people, I'll be reading it at the gym, and, somebody will come up to me and they'll go, Are you from Texas? Like, they just, of course, that's the assumption you're going to make, right? Like, why would this guy in Columbus, Ohio be reading a Texas
I wouldn't
Monthly
make
magazine?
that assumption, but I mean, every other person out there probably would make that assumption that, yes, you're reading a Texas magazine because you are a Texan.
Yeah, and there's only like 3 magazines that I read that I'm regularly reading, right? That I'm a subscriber to, and one is 614 magazine, which makes sense, right? Because it's a Columbus magazine. I'm an Ohio boy, but anyway, so I've had multiple times where someone at the gym will ask me if I'm from Texas, and then I have to explain to them how I started reading Texas Monthly, and it was because many years ago, my old life, when I was involved in a different line of work, I traveled a good deal for work, and I would be in kind of random hotels in different big cities. And they used to
Don't lie, you were doing computer all over the country.
I was setting up computer for everyone, and
yes,
you're welcome, America.
You're spreading the gospel.
That's right. So you'd remember back in the day, I don't think they don't do this too much anymore. If they are doing it, they're not doing it in my hotel rooms. But back in the day, they used to put a couple of magazines in your room. And
sure,
I would go to Dallas, Texas. I think they sent me there for work maybe 3 times during my tenure. But it was Texas Monthly magazine would regularly be on a nightstand or on the desk when they would send me there, and I would find myself reading the thing damn near cover to cover. And Bill mentioned that it's a good magazine for true crime. Now, most of the time and most of the articles, it's very little true crime as far as the entire catalog would go. But about every other month, you get these really lengthy, in-depth storytelling type art. I mean, we're talking, I read one from last summer, Bill, and I can't remember what it was on, but it was true crime, and it was like 20 pages long. And I mean,
wow.
Yeah, we're talking probably every bit of 9,000 words.
Real journalism.
And so, yeah. And the writing is brilliant. Anyway, that's a really long way of saying that's why I still subscribe to it, because it's cheap. And I'm telling you, 9-10 times a year, you're going to get a fascinating true crime read that's as good as any book out there. But I just so happened to read this one in the August 2024 edition that came out. And this goes back to, and I know this is general knowledge, so I'm not trying to be somebody that, oh, here's breaking news or anything like this, but I think that this puts it into perspective, and it also lays it out very succinctly for all of us to think about and chew on for a bit. Because with cases like Amy's, where we are told time and time again, we have some DNA, we're just waiting on technology. The sample's so small, we're just waiting on technology to catch up with what we have. And one day we're going to use this to catch our guy. And we've all been there, because all of us want justice for these people. All of us want justice for these families. All of us want to help these families find some way to start the healing process. And in Mark Mihaljevic's case, and in his son's case, it's all of these years later, and who knows how much healing they've truly been able to do since 1989. how little the healing may have been since 1999 or 89, all of these years later. And so it's only human, and I've done this myself, and I'm sure many of the listeners out there have done the same thing, that will go, screw it, just test this, and let's shot in the dark, Hail Mary this thing, and maybe it comes out. We got God on our side. We're going to get the answers. We're going to find the guy. But this article, it was about, they were interviewing Othram Labs. And Othram Labs has done great work on DNA, whether it be suspect killer's DNA to identify a killer all of these years later, or to identify unidentified remains. And that case that I talked about earlier, where I was talking with a detective here from the state of Ohio, that is a case that was investigated as a homicide. It's unidentified remains that are, let's say, over a decade old. And right now, the Porchlight Project, in work with this jurisdiction, we are sending physical evidence to Othram Labs down in the great state of Texas to identify this individual and to help us with this case that was being worked as a homicide. And anybody that wants to know more about what that nonprofit does, or if you are feeling generous and you want to help the cause and get involved, go to porchlightonline.org. That's porchlightonline.org. You'll have a history of the cases that we've worked since our inception. You'll see cases that we've had success with, and you'll see other agencies in the state of Ohio that we've worked with. And there's easy resources there if you want to contribute to the cause. But so they did, I don't know, Bill, maybe 10 pages on Othram Labs. And this was brilliant because they're telling the story of Othram Labs, but they're also telling some of the successes that they've had in closing out some of these cases that many people at one time had to resort to the idea of, my daughter's murder's never going to be solved. She was killed 20 years ago, 25 years ago, 30 years ago. They had some persons of interest, but now I'm in my 70s now. They're never going to solve my poor daughter's murder. One of the cases that they featured in here was a twin, two twins. So grown up together, the best of friends, as most twins usually are. And in their early adult lifehood, these two young women, one of them gets married, the other one gets murdered. She's all these years believing that her best friend, her sister, her twin sister, they're never going to solve her murder. No, Othram Labs did. And with working with these local law enforcement and these different law enforcement agencies in Texas and outside of that state. So we're sending physical evidence down there, and it's just pure happenstance, my friend, that I had read this article shortly before, thankfully getting involved in that case and getting the case from this jurisdiction here that I think is going to be a solve. And I hope it's going to be a quick solve. And I hope Amy's case is going to be a quick solve now that things are starting to line up. But I wanted to read this little snippet here, and it's one of the founders. So Othram was founded by a husband and wife. And this is the wife talking during this portion here, but it succinctly says why you don't want to just do what I said earlier out of anger and frustration and out of desperation, right? Mm-hmm. Out of desperation as well, to just say, oh, screw it. Let's push all of our chips in and test it. Let's go get this guy. So here we go. I'll attempt to read directly from Texas Monthly here. The lab ends up rejecting about a third of the evidence it receives. Better to wait until forensic technology improves, the Middlemans believe. They're the founders. Mm-hmm. They make a futile bid to obtain a genetic profile. Each test uses up a portion of scarce crime scene DNA. Some forensic labs have destroyed entire samples without obtaining a profile. Quote, in medicine, you would never treat a patient if you had no idea whether it would help or not, end quote. That's from Kristen Middleton. She goes on to say, if you're running the DNA on assays that don't work, you're consuming it, which means you're consuming someone's last chance at justice. And I had never, I wanted to read that because I've always known all of that, but I had never thought of it in the reverse, right? Where a doctor, any doctor in their right mind wouldn't just operate on Bill, not knowing if it's going to help or hurt, help or harm. And so I had never thought of it in that manner. And so I thought it was pretty profound, and I wanted to share that with everybody.
Yeah, it's very profound, and it is an answer to what a lot of people ask. The answer to the question of why don't they just test it all? Well, there's your answer. I think it's plain and simple, and you just read it in black and white.
That so much plays into Amy's case here.
Absolutely. And they told me that from day one. They don't want to blow it all.
And all of the people that care about Amy's case, there's so many people out there that care deeply about Amy's case, that people that went to school with her, people that grew up in the area like you and James Renner, and even people like me who grew up in the next biggest city 2 hours away, all the way down here in Columbus. We should give a shout out. I know it's going to be a very close call. They have that Amy Run, Amy Walk thing going on again this year.
On the 26th.
Yeah. Were you able to give a shout out on that?
I have not given a shout out on it yet. This will be the first time that we can mention it, but they are going to have an honorary walk and I believe run, which would be very Bay Village esque, but on October 26th, I believe they're having this memorial walk.
Yeah, which that's the actual anniversary of the abduction.
27th is the actual.
The 27th.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm sitting here looking at my calendar and I'm looking. All right, Friday's the 25th, Saturday's the 26th. That's going to be the run and the walk day, and then Sunday is the sad reminder of the day that she was abducted, when she met. So she was just trying to do something nice for her mom. Can you think of anything more sad? A little girl trying to do something nice for one of her parents. And that's the ruse that this jerk used to trick a little kid. It breaks your heart, and it reminds you, doesn't it? You're a Stephen King guy, much like myself.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds you of the Green Mile, right? Where he says, he used their love. He used their love to trick them when he's talking about some of the victims there. But it's a really sad case. And I just hope that we're getting closer. And this is the first good bit of nugget, this first really good nugget of potential.
It's the first new news that we've had since I uncovered since Spetzel told me that she had $45 to spend for her mom, and that whatever was left over that she could spend on herself. So other than that new information that came out during my podcast, it's been pretty quiet. And like you were saying, this is good stuff. And this is what we want. This is the direction that the case needs to head in. And I think we are at least on the right path. And I don't necessarily think we're in a holding pattern. I think we're still moving in the right direction. So anyway, I know you've got to roll. So any final thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was just thinking about it's called the Amy Mihaljevic Memorial Run and Walk. And yes, it will be Saturday, October 26th. And that is in Bay Village at 459 Calhoun Road. and
Cahoon. Yeah,
their-
that's
Cahoon Road. Thank you.
That's right near where she was abducted.
And I do have there should be a link on my Twitter, and I'll send that
provide a
out
link as
again,
well.
Bill. And I'll tag you in there, Bill. But yeah, if you're in the area and hopefully there's good weather for this, and you want to get out and you want to do something, you want to be a part of something bigger and get involved, this is another great, easy way to do that and to show your support. And as they say on the Amy Walk, so it's runsignup.com. But as they say here, Amy is forever in our hearts and is never forgotten.
That's a 100% fact. And the city of Bay Village would want nothing more, and I would want nothing more for Mark and the city to be able to put this case behind them. Thank you guys so much for tuning in this week to the update on the Amy Mihaljevic case. We are all waiting with bated breath for answers to this 35-year-old mystery, and I can't thank Nick from the True Crime Garage podcast enough for joining me this week to discuss this case. Again, we have been friends since this project began, and the case itself has been what brought us together. So it's been a fortuitous and great friendship, and we hope for the best, and we want nothing more than to see resolution to this case. And again, like I mentioned before, this is something that should be solved. Should be solved is a relative term, but hopefully be solved before it's too late. I mean, it's getting late in the game, and let's just be honest, it's 35 years. So I know the technology is apparently around the corner, and we can all just sort of sit in this holding pattern that they mentioned within the police department, and I guess we are waiting for them to give us an update. So it's kind of like where we were before, but with a little bit more information and a better outcome with this DNA compared to the DNA that was there before. I mean, they still have that DNA to work with, but this is the DNA that will one day lead to a actual suspect. So it will be very interesting, as I mentioned to Nick, about who that person is and what that person does and what the connection to the family will be. So again, stay tuned, but I will be dropping new episodes every Friday, and you can follow me on Twitter at BillHuffman3. I also produce Crime Capsule, which is a great NPR-style podcast about history books and the interviews with the authors of those books. And it's a great show. You can find that on History Press or evergreenpodcast.com/crime capsule. So check that out. And again, as always, until next time, stay healthy and be safe.
Coming up on 5 Minute News, I'm Anthony Davis. You might think it's partisan because maybe it's critical of one side or the other, but it's not. It's just the truth. And I think that's also something that's kind of unusual for Americans listening to the radio or to podcasts, because the news landscape in the States has been so partisan for so many decades. So 5 Minute News is verified, truthful, independent, unbiased, and essential world news daily.
At Jiffy Lube, we car about cars. In fact, we're kinda obsessed. That's why we've been taking care of business with quick quality oil changes and service for over 40 years. And with things like our Carful Vehicle Review, where our experts will check, fill, clean, and inspect your vehicle, you'll know we'll car for your car like we car for our own. Jiffy Lube. Car more.
Visit JiffyLubeDC.com to find a Jiffy Lube service center near you.